So basically what I was planning on covering today is live electronic music performance, which is something that I didn't really put any focus on until maybe 18 months ago or a year ago or something like that. And then I started deciding that I was getting bored sort of just playing my WAV files out at every show. And I was like, this is like, playing 100 shows a year or something, or 50 to 100 shows a year of just playing WAV files out of my computer started to get really stale. So I started to kind of consider a bunch of different ways on which I could play electronic music out of Ableton. But I had a couple of considerations for it. Like when you write a track in the studio, there's always that argument of like, well, I spent so long doing it this particular way in the studio, why would I want to change anything about that live and stuff like that? And I know it's a good argument, I guess, but I figured that I might as well, just because it's more fun and you lose maybe some fidelity, but you gain some like performance aspect of it, so it kind of might not sound as good, but it's actually kind of more fun for the performer, I feel like, and more fun for the audience member to watch as well, in my opinion. Is anyone here actually like performing regularly, like playing shows and stuff? Yeah? 1, 2 people? Okay, so it's probably not relevant to anyone then. So probably should talk about something else maybe. Yeah, and then also we're going to talk about some integration with visuals. Is anybody interested in integrating performance and visuals? Yep, almost everyone, cool. Sweet, so yeah, I'm not really sure. The best place to start, I guess, would be with the master session. So this is the master session that I run live. And one thing I'm going to just put out on the table is, for starters, don't think about this as a DJ set in any way. At no point am I taking one track and blending it with another track. That's just not something that I'm interested in doing anymore. So I play linearly out of arrangement view. I blend all of my tracks in sessions at home, and then I just push spacebar and drink vodka on stage. And no. Yeah, basically I blend it all linearly, and then I kind of, you'll see these are like chunks, so I kind of make all these separate chunks here, like chunk 1, chunk 2, chunk 3. I make these in separate sessions, and then I render the stems out of those into a standardized set of stems, which is drums, bass, music, and vocals, and then I re-import them into this session. And then throughout the set, I'll have things muting on and off, and then when things mute, then my drum pad or my controller or something will turn on a rack, and then that rack will kind of correlate to the samples that did exist once in that, in that audio track. So for instance, like to give you an example of that, originally this section sounded like this. So what I've done here is then when it comes to this section is I just mute out all of those and then I start playing this now. And then kind of play parts live. And there really isn't a lot of shit that I can do with that. Like I can't just play any random pattern because it just won't sound good. So I pretty much am just tackling this from almost like a metal standpoint, where you'll just sit in your room like, because I was in metal bands before doing electronic music, and pretty much what I would always do in those situations is just sit in my room and just like practice like really, really arbitrary patterns over and over and over again, and then when you go and play live, you just play the exact thing, and you don't really change or improvise on it in any way. And a few people have tried to tell me that like my performance is like it's lesser than because there's no like improvisation, but there's like improvisation in some parts, but for the most part, not really. And then these racks, which I'll go through in a bit, they take a while to build as well. So when you cut out all the audio from like the stems, you have to put it into a drum rack, and then to get the drum rack to trigger the right stuff, I just put a pitch plugin before the rack, and then do a bunch of pitch plugin automation stuff. So in cases like this, it's a little bit more intense, where I'm kind of programming it to just like play very specific things, and yeah, so that's the basis of the performance. And then we have like some MIDI happening here, which I still haven't finished. I need to finish writing MIDI for this whole thing, But basically what's going on here is the MIDI is getting sent out of this grabber receiver, and it's getting sent to this computer here through a network, and then that's triggering mouths in VDMX through OSC, and then that's showing up on this inflatable over here. And then I also have a drummer next to me when I play live. Hutch, I think he's down the back somewhere. Yeah, there he goes, all the way over there. Yeah, so he plays drums during the performance as well. And then we have like, usually we don't use the inflatable. What we use is like this big custom stage, which looks like a city. And then the city has like some houses and shit in front of it. And then we do all this like projection map stuff. Well, Brandon and Jordan do a lot of projection mapping stuff. And that's the basis of the performance. So I think that electronic music is kind of in this exciting, preliminary stage still. It's like it's in this exciting period at the moment where it's still really, really young, and people aren't really exploiting performance at all. They're just kind of playing their tracks and being their own cheerleader, so to speak. And that's fun, but yeah, I think we're gonna see some really interesting stuff with electronic music performance in the coming years, and that's kind of what my buzz is at the moment. I'm all excited about it. So I guess now the logical place to start is how I begun building this set, because it was a really huge project. It looks really maybe simple at this point because it's just all simplified. And the reason it's simplified so much is because I need to run this session at 64 samples, meaning that my controllers have no latency because I'm playing a lot of stuff that's really rhythmically heavy. So you can't really have any latency. So I'm basically like trying to optimize the set as much as possible all the time, trying to get as much stuff out of it as possible. So having as little warped clips as possible, having as little tempo automation clips as possible, as little information as possible, basically. And then the way that we're actually syncing both of these computers here is with timecode, which is just this like large file of noise that I'm sending to Brandon's computer, and that kind of syncs up his VDMX. Then he sends his VDMX out into Ableton, which runs his session that way instead of using like MIDI sync or link or anything like that. And we found it's a lot more stable actually using timecode, which is weird because it's from the 70s, and nothing from the 70s was good. So if I go into my fall tour stuff, which is here, you can kind of see all of these sessions. So chunk 1, chunk 2, chunk 3. This is kind of like the sessions that I use to build like these particular chunks here. And the way that I started actually was by rendering all of my stems. So if I go into my, that's the final chunk stems. I'm not actually sure where my stem folder is, but it's somewhere. Anyway, I rendered like a huge folder of stems, and then those stems basically got turned into like lots and lots of VIPs, and I'll show you if I can find it. So I'll just open the first chunk file, which is correlating to this section just here. Save changes, no. Yeah, so just imagine that this first session that I'm opening is just this bit here, like just this orange section. And then you'll see, it's the way that I built it, it would be impossible to build 6 chunks like that and then have them all running at once. So this is that session. It looks like this. This is just for that first chunk, and then you can see it's just a shit ton of stems, and then I've done a lot of editing with the stems, so it's different. Like for instance, this track here. It's like a different version of itself that it used to be, and then yeah, so most of the set is actually like VIPs at this point, where I've just kind of re-edited stems and remashed them up in certain ways to create new songs and stuff like that. Especially all this sort of stuff, it's like just iterations of, I've got the bass of one track playing with just some random noise samples, and then playing with like the drums of a completely different track. So yeah, basically that's the idea, and then I've rendered them down into like, not rendered them down, but I've just grouped them and then kind of rendered all of those stems out. And then a lot of people also ask me, how do I, when I play live, play with stems, how do I make it sound mastered? rather than sound like shitty unmastered stems. And basically the answer is just really stupidly rendering it all through limiters, and then it kind of just translates to sounding somewhat mastered, I guess, when you play it live. And then the way that I deal with the tempo automation, because I obviously did a lot of tempo automation in all of these chunk files when I was building all the pieces of the set, I create this piece of audio, which is a long chunk of silence, and then I just warp it, and then you can see all of these warp markers here just create themselves wherever there's tempo changes. So for instance, if you look at this section here, I have a tempo change that goes from 130 to 160, and then you can see here all of these warp markers here will correlate to those changes specifically. So if I click on any one of these warp markers, like let's say this one, you can see the segment BPM down here says 149.04. Then you can see like this warp marker says 150.38 or whatever. And then what you do to get the tempo change into the master file is you just cut this clip here, and then you go into your master file and you paste it. And then instead of having the warped clip set as a slave, you set it as a master, and then it applies the tempo automation to the master, and then you just simply delete the clip. And that's the way that you get tempo changes from one session to another. Unfortunately, you can't just cut and paste it from one to another. It's really stupid. But yeah, you can't. So that's the only way that I've actually found to be able to do that. And that's pretty much the basics of the setup that we're doing. Does anyone have any questions at this point?
It seems like there's a lot of steps in that like tempo change thing, and it seems really cool. Is there a place where we could like check that out more in depth and like play with that, or is that just a method that you've come up with?
No, it's just a method that I've come up with, but I can show you how to do it if you like, in its full entirety. So let's go back to chunk one, and I'll show you exactly how to do it.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, I think I did a tutorial about it online once at some point, maybe. But yeah, it's kind of interesting. It's not really useful for anything unless you're actually, I think, trying to get a lot of different tempo changes from a lot of different sessions into a single session. But it's, yeah, for this very specific thing, it's totally helpful. So what I usually do is I just set my input to just something random. So I don't know, let's call this random shit. And then just take the input here from random shit, and then hit record. Just record a bit of silence. So you don't want actually anything in this clip, you just want silence. Then we can delete the random shit channel, we don't need that anymore. And then we can just basically loop this for the entirety of the chunk, like this. And then we hit consolidate. And that'll take a minute, but what'll happen is instead of it being like a lot of looped clips like that, it will just become like one long clip, and it will just have the inherent tempo information buried into the warp markers, and then you just cut and paste that clip into your master session and set it to be master instead of slave. You know what I mean? Yeah, it's not super tricky, but it's just kind of like an innovative way of getting tempo changes from a lot of different places into one place. Does anyone have any other questions? Well, I guess we don't have to wait for this to consolidate if you kind of understand the point and how it works. Yeah, screw it, I'm not waiting for that shit. All right, I'm going to go back to this session. Yeah, if anyone has questions at any point, just feel free to ask. Yep.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like you have like the overall performance, and then you have you have the individual sections parts, and in those sections you have like kind of these Frankenstein, it's like a mini set inside the overall set.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I'm building like sections of like, so for instance in chunk one, I might have, I think like 5 or 6 tracks that kind of blend into each other. But maybe the first track has the drums of another track, and the second track has the bass of another track and stuff. So when people come to see me live, if they're like super fans and they know my stuff really well, then they're never hearing anything that they're going to hear at home. And partially one of the things that I like to think about when I'm building sets is that I want to create something that's not so, like something that you can't just have at home. If you can just sit at home and listen to my SoundCloud and it's effectively the same thing, then what's the point in leaving my house? Like I might as well just stay there and write music or something, So I try to kind of blend live performance, like with Hutch's drumming, plus like things that I'm performing, plus just the fact that I'm like in the room. And you know, if you go to see an artist and they're just in the room, it's kind of interesting too, like just to see them, as much as a stupid fucking thing as that is. And also like the visuals and stuff. It's like just instead of like, I think of it like producing a show. Producing a song, but instead I'm producing like this experience, like this show, you know. But yeah, basically it's like a lot of mini sets, and then these sets are being compiled into a big 90-minute set. But if I were to actually have all of the stuff going on in each of those sets in this giant 90-minute master file, it just wouldn't run. It would be way too clunky, and it can't really have that, unfortunately. As for the monitoring section, obviously both Hutch and I need a click. So we have these channels which are just, you know, click based. Sort of just found the I found the Ableton click. I can't remember where it is, but it's somewhere. You can like find the Ableton metronome sounds and you can change them and all that shit. I didn't change them. I just got the sounds and put them in here, and then just made this sampler, and the sampler just has the metronome in it. And actually, if I set this to go to my master really quick, you can hear it. It's pretty boring. It just sounds like a click. But there's one interesting thing about it. Let's see. So for the most part, it's just a click. But I've also put these things all through it, and they just count. They say 1, 2, 3, 4.
1, 2, 3, 4.
And basically those things just denote for either Hutch or I to start or stop playing. So basically when you hear 1, 2, 3, 4, it just means like if you're playing, stop, and if you're not, probably start. If you feel like it or whatever. Yeah, and yeah, it's good doing a click this way rather than just using the inbuilt live click, because then you can kind of go between subdivisions really easily and stuff, because I don't actually think you can automate the subdivisions up here. In fact, I'm almost certain that you can't. Yeah, you can't, as far as I know. Yep, and then so this is Hutch's monitoring section. I'm just taking, so I had to group all of this stuff, like all of my racks here. So each of these racks, you see the color correlates to the sections in the set. So each of these channels here kind of takes care of one chunk's worth of shit on this pad, and that stuff just like turns on and off throughout the set, so it's not using processing power. So for instance, you can see chunk 1, the instrument rack with everything in it is turned on for this period of time, but then as soon as we go to chunk 2, that one turns off, and then the chunk 2 one turns the chunk 2 one turns on for the entirety of chunk 2, and so just to again free up more processing power and to make the session a little bit lighter to run. So to make sure that all of these racks were being sent to both of our in-ear monitors at the same time, I had to group everything into this big channel. I just called it music all, because it's essentially what it is. And then just took the input for the music from that, and then it just built the click channel in there. And then instead of having 2 click channels, one for me and one for Hutch, when I set up my monitoring section, I just take the input from my click channel from his click channel. And then I just send that to output 13 and 14, which is the headphone out on my Motu. And then to Hutch, I send it out output 3, which is just a mono output on the back of my Motu. And then again, I'd have a music channel that takes the input from Music All as well. And then I have this input here, which I never use, so I should probably just delete it at some point. But the idea is that if the sound guy can send me back his drum mix in a 1/4-inch jack, then I can have that coming back into my ears as well. And that's kind of the monitoring section. And that's pretty much the overview of it. So if I'm going to go into, next thing I'll probably go into is like how I actually deal with building these racks. So does anyone have any questions before we move on to that? Nope. Okay, cool. So to build these racks, I basically start off with like a drum rack, and then I have the MIDI notes on my SPDSX set to G sharp -2 and D -2, and then I put a pitch plugin before the drum rack, which you can see just here, and that is automated, and basically depending on where that pitch plugin is, depends on what samples are being hit. So if I kind of scroll through this, you can probably hear what's happening. So if it's on 0, that's what it's triggering. If I set it up 1 semitone, the same pad triggers a different sample, and so on. And it just, basically that's what the automation in this pitch plugin is for, is so throughout the set, I'm not having to like change scenes and all that stuff. It's just doing all of that automatically, and then I can just play, and I don't have to worry about anything really, except drinking vodka, of course. So yeah, and then sometimes it's like literally just for performance sake. It's not even like any skill really involved in playing something that's programmed this hard. It's more or less just like, again, about the show production. So in this section, this is all I'm doing.
1, 2, 3, 4.
And that's it. Like the sample just keeps changing because the pitch plugin just keeps changing. I bet you're all looking at me right now like, you're a cheap liar. You're actively lying to me about how good of a drummer you are. And yeah, that's absolutely what I'm doing. But I'm not lying as much as DJs. So, and to be fair, in the next section I do this. So.
1, 2, 3, 4.
And just play garage sections and stuff. And it's just fun. It's nice to hit something. Like turning knobs is shit. So yeah, does anyone have any other questions? I think I can show you more. Yeah.
About your live drumming situation.
Uh-huh.
Because I use live drums with my Ableton setup, and
Like you have a drummer?
Yeah, I have a drummer.
Okay.
So is your drummer an electronic drummer?
No, Hutch, he plays an acoustic kit. We sometimes, when we played in Australia recently, or actually when it was like the start of the year, we had an entire acoustic kit. So the kick and the snare was acoustic, the cymbals were all acoustic, and then just the toms were electronic.
Is that because you wanted a certain kind of tuned tom that was...
I'm not sure. Why did we do that?
We used the Roland TD30 for auxiliary snares and claps.
Yeah, I guess
Yeah,
just to give it some sort of electronic element. Yeah, but we stopped doing that, I think, because we kind of figured that like everything in my drum channels here is all electronic. Like you can literally listen through any of this and it's just all electronic drums,
right.
so there's no point in doing the electronic drums again.
It would just compete with
Yeah.
the frequencies, and
Exactly.
so I've just had challenges with the live drums.
Yeah.
And the electronic. The venues I'm playing are pretty mid-small.
Yep.
And I'm always battling with, are the drums drowning out these synth parts that I like sweat over?
Yeah, we've actually had that issue the last few shows that we've played, where the sound guy, we've been in a small room like this sort of size, or maybe slightly bigger, and the sound guy's like, okay, I'm just going to mic up the kit, and I'm like, I don't think we need to, it's pretty small. And then he mics it up, turns all the drums up, and then turns my music up, and I'm like, okay, we need to just keep turning the music up, keep turning the music up, keep turning the music up. And quite often we just turn all the drums down and the music right up, and then Hutch is just like, drums are super loud. Like you need a pretty loud system to even compete with drums. Right. So in a lot of the smaller rooms, you don't really need to mic them up at all. And quite often they go to all this effort to mic them up and then it's not used. Like the last two shows, I don't think we've used the mic'd versions at all.
That's a good hint. And one other question, do you ever use an intermediate sound guy that's actually controlling some more of your outputs? Or is it all just you?
Oh, you mean like
the house sound?
No, I wouldn't bother so much with that because I mix all my stuff in my studio, and I think the relationship of like because mixes are all relative, right? So I think the relationship of the drums to the bass and the bass to the music and the music to the vocals, it's going to pretty much stay regardless of the room.
Okay, that helps a lot. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, I would suggest just using acoustic drums is just like a total headache off. Because when you start doing a lot of the electronic stuff, it makes stuff a lot harder to mix. And then, also some triggers can be a bit sus. Sorry, did you have a question up the back? Yeah.
The same thing. So one thing I'm a little bit unclear about is the pitch aspect of what you just talked about.
Okay,
because
sure.
If you were to like take your drum rack and load up a bunch of samples and like distribute them equally, and tie it to a macro and then automate that macro, wouldn't that have the same effect, or would it be different than like using?
Yeah, no, it'd be totally the same thing if I well, it wouldn't be quite the same thing, but let's see. You're saying if I had all of my samples loaded up from C-2 to the however high you can go, and then set them up as a chain, are you saying? And then set the macro to be like that?
Yeah,
but then
so all of them would be pulled out, and then you distribute them equally and tie that to a macro.
Yeah, you could do that as well. The only thing is that like I often use multiple racks at the same time and stuff, and I don't know. I've found it easier just doing it that way. So for instance, this section here where I'm sort of playing bells, in this section it's just bells. And then in the next section, directly after it, another rack turns on and it becomes bells layered with gongs. Like, and I feel like that might get a little tricky, and then it comes over here and then it layers with a music box. And I think, I kind of feel like that would get a little tricky if all the stuff was on a linear scale rather than like a vertical one. I don't know, it's just a personal preference though. I guess you could probably do it both ways for sure. But one thing I used to do though is I used to use the this chain selector, and I used to make multiple drum racks, and then I used to have stuff like this, and then I would just automate the chain selector up by one semitone at a time, like that. And to me it was just always more of a pain in the ass. And then I just moved to the pitch plugin thing, and it's been easier since, I guess. I think it makes it easier to set arbitrary stuff in your rack, you know? So I felt like when I was doing the pitch plugin, the chain selector thing, when I had a drum rack, like I'll show you. Damn, this session is so boggy. All right, so let's say I have a drum rack. Turn off these channels here and just set that to input. So, all right, I'm getting MIDI in here. So my lowest note is, well, actually you have to put a note length plugin before this Roland thing because it only spits out like the tiniest little piece of MIDI information. So I just set it to kind of give off about a quarter note. Okay, so you can see that the lowest note it's hitting there is a C-2. And then drums. What's this? This will do. So the way I've got it set up, like the way I have my MIDI mapping set up, is not so it just correlates to a drum rack like this. And I don't know why I set it up that way. I guess because just mentally for me it's a little easier to envision the pad and the rack as the same sort of like configuration. Otherwise I'll just start confusing myself about arbitrariness between the two. So if I just have my stuff set up like this with 9 samples, and then I really should set up choking. So I don't know if you know about choking. It's pretty cool though. If you just select all of these channels and then just select the choke and hit it at 1, it means that it can't play any more than 1 sample at a time, or the rack can't play any more than 1 sample at a time. So if I have this sample running, let's see. Yeah, if this sample's running and then I hit this one, it's going to choke it, like, so you're not getting like double ups and shit. So yeah, the thing that I found weird was that if this correlates to the first 9 samples in the rack, like, and then I had to, that's the shittest. And then I had to like, press plus on this to go to the next set of MIDI information, which is E0 to A sharp, -1. I just felt like it was a little too constrained. Whereas like in this way, doing it with the pitch plugin, I can just have these anywhere. Like I can just have this here and this here and this here. It doesn't matter. I can just like automate a pitch plugin, and I guess you could do that as well with the chain selector, but I just for some reason feel like it's harder with the chain selector for some reason. Do you want the mic? I can't really hear, sorry.
I think maybe what he was saying is like putting a sampler on a drum pad and putting like a bunch of samples in that and then just selecting on an individual pad. Yeah,
no, there's totally a million ways to do it. Yeah, you could absolutely do it a bunch of ways. This is just the way that I chose to do it. And actually with the new sampler in Live 9.5, I want to say that it was introduced, where it has the warping in it and you can set it to like have that cutting stuff. I can't actually remember. Oh, I think you have to have, you know how you have the new simpler and it can just like cut up the points and all that stuff. I've done that actually. I've utilized that in a few sections. I can show you how I've utilized it in one way. And that honestly might be the way that I build my next set, is just utilizing simplers in that way, because when I built this set, that simpler hadn't been released yet, and I'd already started doing it in this one way. And then kind of they released that, and I was like, oh, that's super cool, but I'm already halfway through doing this, and so I just continued doing it this way. But I did use it in this section here. So every time I hit a pad, hold on, I'll open the sampler and show you. So what I'm doing here is utilizing this simpler and using these cut points here, if you can see that. And then I got a bunch of MIDI plugins before it. So these MIDI plugins, the note length makes sure, for starters, that when I hit this, instead of just lasting a millisecond, the MIDI note lasts a quarter note. And then the arpeggiator takes that quarter note and splits it up into a triplet, which at a quarter note equals, I guess, 3 notes. So like duck-a-duck, like a triplet. And then I have a randomizer after that, and the randomizer says that there's a 100% chance of it being random. That's what the top one means. And then the choices that it has to select from are 8, so it can potentially select 8 different notes. And then I have a scaling plugin after it, and this scaling plugin just makes sure that it can't hit any note that isn't in that scale. So then whenever I hit this, you can see it just randomly selects a few different bass hits from this simpler. And then I've set that up for 9 different pads, and they all do the same thing, but with different samples. So it's like, and it's also set up with choking. So if I want, I can do like other cool stuff like. And then with a beat, it's kind of fun.
1, 2, 3, 4.
So yeah, you can do some fun stuff with it for sure. And I bet if you set the whole setup through a simpler, you could do super, super cool stuff. I've only used it in a few parts of the set like that. But yeah, I mean, it's up to, you know, like I was saying at the start of this talk, I feel like electronic music is still in such a young stage, like it's so unevolved, especially in the live performance aspect, that I think stuff's going to get super cool soon. Yep. Does anyone have any other questions about stuff? Nope. Okay. So this timing rack here, this is just, the only reason this is here is because I needed to hear some audio while I was generating this MIDI yesterday. And actually, is the vocal stuff working? Oh, sweet. Nice. So this is really cool. We figured this out yesterday. So as we're touring, we're constantly like building on it as well. Like me, Brandon, and Jordan are constantly trying to develop ways that this set can be more amazing and more involved and have more cool like integration and all of that stuff. And this is one way that we figured out how to do that yesterday. So basically what I have here is MIDI information from a piano roll. And then this MIDI information is being turned into OSC, which I'd never really messed with too much until yesterday. But Jesse was very adamant that it was better. And I kind of agree. It seems faster. So what's happening here is we have this note grabber. So, well, actually, it starts with this rack. So this rack has a bunch of clips of silence in it, and the only reason these clips of silence exist is so I can name them, so that in the piano roll the names are like here down the side. So you can see that this one says STP, and that just means stop. So it's a stop clip. Then there's AIL, so it's a mouth shape, like a PNG file of a mouth shape that looks like you're saying A or I or L, and then E, and then O, etc., etc. And they just, all of these, just assign them to like PNG files in Brandon's computer here of like, you know, Disney vocal shapes, basically. So then what we're doing, because you can't send the MIDI out of this now, because once you put a drum rack on it, it treats it as an audio output. So what we had to do is take this second channel called Note Grabber, taking that input from Mouth MIDI rack. So that's taking the MIDI from the channel above it. And then I'm sending the channel out of Mr. Bill's Tunes, which is a network. So I'm not very good at networking. It took us like fucking a million hours to figure that out yesterday. So just Google shit about networks, I guess. Yeah, and then I'm just sending it out on track from the network. And then on this note grabber channel, I've got all these MIDI notes that are getting taken in. So it's taking a C -2, and then it's outputting it as I've just named them as these OSC addresses: STP, AIL, EEE, etc. This particular plugin is called Single Note Grabber, but it only does 7 note translations of MIDI to OSC, I guess. So then I had to put it in a rack and create a second one just to do the last 2, and it has no problems with that. So I guess you can just rack up as many of these as you like, or up until the point of running out of MIDI messages, basically. And then on the master channel, we do not need grabber receiver. On the master channel, I have grabber sender. And then you can see the target IP address, which is Brandon's IP address, and then the target port address, which is Brandon's port address. And then it just runs through Bonjour, which on PC, if you're using PC, you're going to need this RTP MIDI plugin, which is basically looks pretty much like the thing that you'll get on Mac within the MIDI audio window, but on PC, they just don't have a built-in thing like that. And then the end result of all of that is that I can just draw in MIDI and it reflects vocal shapes over there. So if you take a look at the MIDI here and kind of see what it's doing over there, you'll understand what I'm talking about. And you can I'll consolidate this and have it play through so you can just sort of see the translation in real time. Yeah, so it's super fun drawing all this stuff. I mean, fun if you like me and you like stupid shit, like drawing MIDI. And then at this point in the set also, Hutch would be playing all of those drums, and then I would just be playing the chord progression on my pad, so the entirety of it. So I feel like the combination of stuff like that, like projection mapping, and having a live drummer playing like crazy drum parts like that, and then just like hitting a pad at all or something is like starts to blend all together to just become some sort of interesting show to watch, rather than just doing whatever. I don't know what other people are doing, I guess, playing shit off USB sticks or something. Or whatever, it's no big deal. Yeah, does anyone have any questions at this point? Yep.
Yeah, hey, this is a pretty basic question, but do you quantize the audio when you're playing the pads or like the MIDI information?
Oh, no, not at all. No, there's actually a plugin that I have to do that though, but it fucks your undo history. I'll show it to you. So where is it? I think it's controllers. No, it wouldn't be there. Syncing tools maybe? Live sync. No, it's not there either. Bits and bobs. No. Somewhere I have this thing that was made for who is it? Destroyed. Do you know Destroyed? They're like a dubstep act. Yeah, it was made for them because apparently they can't play in time that well. So basically, what it is it's like a gate, and the gate just like opens up however often you want it to open up. So you can have it open up every quarter note or every 16th note or something. And basically, if you hit something, it won't let that MIDI note through until that gate opens up like the half a 16th note later or something, But the shitty thing is that if it's like opening up every 16th note, every single one of those counts as an undoable event. So if you have it running for like 30 seconds and it does that shit like 500 times, then you have to undo like 500 times before you can get back to the thing that you wanted to undo or whatever. Yeah, I have the Max controller somewhere in here, but I don't really know where it is because I don't use it. So no, it's all completely unquantized. Like, yeah, just try and keep it sort of somewhat live, even though I kind of want it to still sound super electronic and super Mr. Billish, but yeah, that's kind of the tricky thing, I guess, is trying to keep it sounding that way and also playing it live. So I try to limit myself to the parts that I play and stuff. Like a lot of drum parts, I don't really play that much because it's super easy to make it sound shit. Like, for instance, this section here, I'm starting to get better at it, but unless you're hitting this stuff completely on, it sounds terrible. But I've played that a ton of times now, but I remember the first time that I programmed the rack for that and tried to play it, I was like, oh, it sounds so fucking bad, because like the kick and the snare wasn't like directly on. And then I quickly realized that you can't really do a lot with it. I just do it because like it's something to do in the set, but like, you know, if I try and change that pattern at all, it just starts to sound shit. Like, here, I'll show you an example. You know what I mean? Like, unless you're just basically playing like a solid pattern, it doesn't sound like that big solid beat that originally was. Like, originally it just sounded like this when I'm not playing it. And it's fun being that way, just being super simple, and I don't really want to change it. So kind of when I play it live, it's just, I just have to just like hit it very simply. Yeah, so where was I? I feel like I was talking about something to do with syncing. Oh yeah, so all this MIDI stuff here, at some point in time, this won't actually be in the set anymore. We're just kind of working this way for the moment, and then eventually what will happen is we'll remove all of this MIDI, put it in, we have this exact same set, what you're looking at right now. We have this in Brandon's computer too, and the difference is he doesn't need any of this. Like all of this shit here, all of these channels, he doesn't need any of it. All he needs is the time code and this MIDI shit, you know? So rather than me running these extra few things on my computer, I can optimize it more by removing them, and then he can optimize it on his end by removing all the other stuff, and then we kind of just have the pieces on our computer that we need. So we actually just sync via time code, which I talked about briefly before. And then he just has the set running in the background of his session, and then the time code syncs to his VDMX, and then the VDMX syncs his Ableton session to run at the same time. So it's kind of complex, but yeah, it works really well. Oh yeah, and this timing rack here, I'll show you what that's for. So let's say I'm programming the vocals for like this part or something. So yeah, let's say the vocal there says, so da 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 is what the vocal is doing. I can mute everything so you can hear it a bit better. So I just had this timing rack here, just taking the input from the mouth MIDI channel, which is down here, just to kind of really easily be able to hear if I'm getting the syllables on the right time and stuff. Something like that. Yeah, it's just an easy way of getting all of the syllables lined up, and then from that point on, so these are just triggering stop clips, and then I would decide what each of those main MIDI notes would assign themselves to in a vowel sense. So that's like an A. Laments. So that's A, and then this would be an L. So probably the same thing again, except by doing two A's in a row, then you're not going to get any movement over there. So you have to start kind of finessing it a bit more with other shapes. Yeah, and you get the idea. It basically turns into this huge project of like moving between mouth shapes to try and create talking, and I'm still shitty at it, but I'm getting better at it. You just end up getting a bunch of really stupid MIDI information that sounds shitty, but just is there to trigger visuals, basically. Yeah, fun times. Also, a lot of the times when I'm playing stuff with the racks, I have stuff muting on and off a lot, like this, because playing like the little technical stuff in between can sometimes be kind of impossible, just because it needs to be super quantized to hold the beat together, because it's almost like percussive. So in a sense like this, this is what it sounds like when it's muting on and off. And also I only have 9 pads, so there's only so much I can play, but in this particular sense, I'm kind of just playing those 2 chords. Yeah, and it's kind of interesting trying to set stuff up from a set onto a pad, because usually when like bands are formed or whatever, I was telling someone here before actually, you go like, all right, you're a drummer, you're a guitarist, you're a bass player, and I'm a singer or something, and then you go, okay, so like let's use our personnel here and what we do to just make music out of that. Whereas by doing this sort of stuff, it's like the opposite way around, because you're like, okay, I've already made the music, now I have to figure out how to distribute that and transpose it evenly over instruments. So that's kind of like a frustrating thing to think about a little bit. But yeah, in some cases, you know, that's the sort of shit that I come up with, and I still, by no stretch, think that I'm good at building live sets. I think that this is something that no one is super good at yet. I think it's going to be a thing that takes a while. But it's not going to go anywhere if people just keep fucking DJing. This is like I'm just doing a whole tour to try and spread this message.